From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we talk about Bayview's 71 different lake captains that lived here in Bayview, Wisconsin during the age of sail and steam, and covering the years 1878 to 1968, 90 years. This episode is sponsored by the Historic Bayview Lake Captains Society. Now today I'm standing in front of the former home of Captain Edward Martin, who was born in 1869, and he spent the bulk of his early sailing days in Buffalo, New York. And what's really interesting about that tour, which is many, many years for him, is that he was selected to be the first captain of the three largest passenger ships, strictly passengers, the largest ever in Great Lakes history. And the man that lived in this house in Bayview, although in Buffalo at the time, before he came to Bayview, captained all three of them. The first captain for each three of them. He was selected to bring each one out. And then he sailed them collectively for 16 years. Later he became a car ferry captain across the lakes, I think mostly living in Michigan, Grand Haven. And then he came over here to Bayview in 1937 as captain of a car ferry, But the impetus was for coming over here was his son, Roland Martin, was also a car ferry captain. Lived over on California Street, which I have an episode coming up on him soon. So Edward Martin, with this amazing background, lives here in Bayview, continuing as a captain. Now also while he was here, he was serving as the flag captain of Grand Trunk's car ferry fleet. Pretty amazing, while he lived in his house. Pretty cool. So lots of good information coming up on today's episode. The narration by Simon Stanhope and some slides. So you can learn more about Edward Martin. Tremendous captain, as they all were. I told you they're great, and they are. And then look for a future episode on his son Roland. Coming up pretty quick. Okay, that's all. Hats off to Bayview's Lake Captains, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bayview to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be discussing the life of Captain Edward E. Martin, who for 16 years captained the largest and greatest passenger liners that ever sailed the Great Lakes. Growing up in poverty in Michigan, he had to learn to read and write in adulthood before he could get his mate's license. Then, towards the end of his career, he was a member of the only father and son team to both captain car ferries at the same time while living in Bayview. Regarded by his peers as one of the greatest captains to ever sail the Great Lakes, Captain Edward Martin's sailing career spanned 52 years, 39 of them as a lake captain. Finally, as he concluded his career in 1937, Edward was named Flag Captain of the Grand Trunk Fleet while living in his Bayview home on South Ellen Street. Captain Edward E. Martin was born on 30th October 1869 in the small settlement of St. James on Beaver Island off the northwest coast of Michigan's Lower Peninsula. St. James is not coincidentally named, as it is located adjacent to St. James Harbour on the island's northeast corner. Edward's father, Edward Ned Martin, was born in Westport, Ireland, in 1823. His mother, Grace, née Malloy, was born in Canada and was living on the Michigan mainland near Charlevoix, not far inland from Beaver Island, when they met. She probably met husband Ned when he came to the mainland from the island. After they were married in 1860, they decided to make Beaver Island their home. It was inhabited then by many immigrants from Ireland, a proud heritage that continues even now. It's referred to as America's Emerald Isle because of its substantial ancestral connection with Ireland. Their first son, John, was born that same year, 1860. Over the next 9 years, 5 more children would be born: Anna, Grace, Catherine, Daniel, and finally the youngest, Edward E., in October 1869. Edward E.'s father, Ned, was a fisherman, likely keeping a fishing boat in St. James Harbour. Fishing had been one of the islanders' primary occupations back then. But in November 1869, less than a month after son Edward E.'s birth, Ned Martin, 46, and his younger brother Michael, 30, both drowned while out fishing on Lake Michigan. This left Ned's wife Grace alone with 6 young children. She moved in with her father on the mainland, then the next year, 1871, remarried to Francis O'Donnell of St. James. Though this second husband, Francis, was to die some time before 1900, he did hero's work, taking care of Grace and helping her raise her 6 young children, in addition to 3 of his own. Edward Martin's life after the death of his father in 1869 is largely unknown. A later news article, in 1937, as he was nearing retirement, reported he had spent 50 years sailing the Great Lakes, beginning at age 16, as a crewman aboard schooners in 1885. Because of the trauma of his father's death and the family's struggles afterward, Edward Martin had grown up without learning how to read or write. As he later advanced up the professional sailing career ladder, he had to learn how to read and write in order to get his mate's license, which he did. He then got his master's license, or captain's license, in 1897, at age 28. Then, in 1898 through 1905, he moved to Buffalo, New York, working as a lake captain, though his ship or ships are unknown, up until 1903. Certainly he proved himself during this time, because in 1904 Captain Edward Martin was named captain of the passenger liner Tionesta. It's also likely, though not confirmed, he was also the ship's very first captain when it was launched in 1902. Captain Martin is documented sailing the Tionesta from Buffalo to Milwaukee for the first time ever on 24th October 1904, where over 10,000 people came aboard for a tour of the ship. A special banquet was held aboard for many dignitaries, including Milwaukee's mayor, to promote the ship's contributions to, and the future of, Great Lakes maritime commerce. His performance as captain of the Tionesta was undoubtedly successful, because 3 years later, in 1906 through 1909, he was named captain of the Tionesta's brand-new sister ship, the Juniata, the largest passenger liner on the Great Lakes. Then he followed this, in 1910, by being selected to be the first captain of the second sister ship of the Tionesta, the brand-new Octorara, which he was to remain captain of for the next 8 years, through 1918. While research didn't find much about the characteristics of the Tionesta, there was some interesting information discovered during research about the Juniata and Octorara as follows. The Juniata was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad Company and operated by the Anchor Line when it sailed the Great Lakes. The ship was first class throughout. It was renowned for its luxurious interior, beautiful mahogany woodwork, and an especially magnificent carved oak staircase. It had staterooms for all of its 350 passengers, fine wicker furniture, and its meal service was regarded as the equivalent of the best American luxury hotels. Its route was between Duluth, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, and Buffalo, New York. After new fire code regulations halted the ship's operations in the late 1930s, due to its extensive wood superstructure and composition, it was rebuilt with all of the wood stripped out of it and renamed the Milwaukee Clipper. Its sailing route, after this renovation, was between Milwaukee and Muskegon, Michigan. After it ceased operations, it was saved and today is a museum ship in Muskegon available for tours. The Octorara was named after the Iroquois Native American word meaning long remembered. Like the Juniata, it sailed between Duluth, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, and Buffalo, New York. However, it carried more passengers, at 594. Just as luxurious as the Juniata, the Octorara had these amenities: a daily newspaper, library, barbershop, dances, bridge tournaments, and even coordinated shore excursions for passengers during stops in the aforementioned ports. The all-included cost for a round-trip ticket in 1930 was $100, the equivalent of $1,820 in 2024. It should be remembered that automobile travel really didn't exist during the time of these three ships, nor did air and rail travel, as all were in their infancy and or limited. The best way to get around in those days was by ship, and thus the popularity of the Tionesta, Juniata, Octorara, and others like them. Many photos of the time show these ships packed with people, and this is the reason why. Likewise, it's also the reason passenger travel on the lakes is almost non-existent today. The automobile and airplane long ago took over from the passenger ship, which, by the start of the Second World War, was on its way out. But nevertheless, future Bayview Lake Captain Edward E. Martin captained all three of these ships, the Tionesta, Juniata, and Octorara, for 16 years. They were the greatest passenger liners in Great Lakes maritime history, and sailed during the height of the Great Lakes maritime passenger travel, and Edward Martin captained them all. This was truly an astonishing achievement. In addition to captaining each of these ships, he was also very likely the first captain of all of them as well. While he could only be found to have been the first captain of the brand-new Octorara, by studying both the dates of his commands and cross-checking these against when all three were built, it's extremely likely he was the very first captain of both the Tionesta and Juniata, in addition to the Octorara, a great honour. All of this accomplished by a man that had grown up in poverty and had to learn to read and write before he could pass his mate's certificate. Truly amazing, and a testament to what hard work and personal fortitude can do to overcome adversity. This was a common trait to be found among all of Bayview's 71 different lake captains. From 1919 to 21, Captain Martin left the Octorara to captain the cargo steamship Allegheny, also of the Anchor Line, though he was still living in Buffalo. The year after that, in 1922, Edward Martin discovered an opportunity that would allow him to return home from Buffalo to Grand Haven, Michigan, where he could be with his family full-time again. He joined Michigan's Grand Trunk Company's car ferry line as captain of the car ferry Grand Haven from 1922 to 26, sailing across Lake Michigan between Grand Haven and Milwaukee. Then he moved over to captain Grand Trunk's car ferry Madison, beginning with its maiden voyage on 3rd March 1927, and continuing on through 1937, interrupted by a one-year stint as captain of the car ferry Grand Rapids in 1933. Adding up the Madison, Tionesta, Juniata, and Octorara, this makes 4 brand-new ships that Edward Martin brought out as captain and sailed on their maiden voyages, a testimony on how well regarded he was by the shipping companies, Grand Trunk and the Anchor Line, that owned them. During this time, in 1934, Captain Edward Martin made a short and slight detour. He moved with his son Roland from Michigan over to Bayview. For 4 years, he lived at 2747 South Ellen Street. Still captain of the Madison, this move may have been prompted by the Madison changing home ports to Milwaukee, or a branch office may have been opened in Milwaukee by the ship's owner Grand Trunk. His son and fellow Bayview Lake Captain Roland Martin later became the Marine Superintendent of Grand Trunk's Milwaukee office in 1956, so the office could have been in Milwaukee before that. But what is perhaps the most significant is that his son, Bayview Lake Captain Roland Martin, who will be featured in a future episode on this channel, moved to Bayview at the same time his father, Captain Edward Martin, did. It was a family event. Roland's address in Bayview was 3137 South California. At the time of the move, Roland was first mate on the car ferry Grand Rapids, but in 1937 would become a lake captain for the first time, the ship being the car ferry Grand Haven. It was the same ship his father Edward had captained 15 years earlier. Even more than that, both father and son were not only car ferry captains at the same time, for 1 year in 1937, but both were car ferry captains at the same time while living in Bayview. The same year, son Roland got his first lake captain job, 1937, was to also be the last year of sailing for his father. Edward finished up his career as captain of the Madison at the end of the sailing season in 1937, when he captained it for the last time, taking the ship to his home in Grand Haven, Michigan. All told, it had been 52 years sailing on the Great Lakes for Edward Martin, 39 of them as captain. He captained 2, Octorara and Madison, and likely 4, adding the Tionesta and Juniata, ships on their maiden voyages. And like so many other captains in this book, did it all with just a 7th-grade education. As he concluded his career in 1937, Edward was named flag captain of the Grand Trunk Fleet, while living at 2747 South Ellen Street in Bayview. Sometime prior to 1910, Edward married wife Frances, her last name unknown. She and Edward had a son, Roland, and while Edward was sailing the lakes based out of Buffalo, New York, with the Anchor Line, Frances and Roland were living in Grand Haven, Michigan. Somewhere during this time, date unknown, a second son was born, Clint. However, sometime after 1910, but before 1918, Frances may have died, because in 1918 Edward took a second wife, Sarah. In 1917, Sarah's husband, Lee Wynne, whom she had been married to since 1890, died, and she already had 2 children. Captain Martin took them under his wing to raise along with his 2 sons. Edward Martin was a real hero. Both sons, Roland and Clint, followed their father Edward into the Great Lakes maritime profession, becoming the 2 youngest officers in the car ferry service. Roland became a lake captain in Bayview, and Clint was second mate on the car ferry City of Milwaukee while living in Bayview at what is today the Muse Guest House and Gallery on East Lincoln Avenue. As previously mentioned, there will be a future episode on this channel about Bayview Lake Captain Roland Martin, as well as another about his brother Clint Martin. After Edward retired to Grand Haven, Michigan, at the conclusion of the 1937 sailing season, he and Sarah enjoyed 10 years together on the Lake Michigan shore, until Sarah died on Christmas Day, 1947, age 79. Captain Edward E. Martin continued on for another 15 years, until he died in 1962, age 93. They are buried together in Grand Haven, with nearly the complete Martin family, son Roland and his wife Viola, 4 of Edward's 5 siblings, though John is missing, Grace, Anna, Catherine and Daniel, who also became a lake captain living in Milwaukee, though not Bayview, and served aboard lightships in the U.S. Lighthouse Service from 1919 to 39, and his mother Grace. In the end, it was Edward's son and Bayview Lake Captain Roland Martin, long since retired at age 84, that put it best when interviewed about his father Edward in 1989. He said, quote, "He was the greatest sailor who ever lived. I became a sailor because of the influence of my father. To me, he was the skipper, not me." Unquote. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about Captain Edward E. Martin, as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now, by individual volumes in both ebook and paperback, on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website under the Contribute button, as well as in the end credits at the conclusion of this video. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. This is the only surviving intact ship that was once captained by a Bayview Lake captain, and in its case was captained by at least 2, and likely 3, totaling over 20 years between them. Finally, we also have free self-guided walking tours of Bayview's 71 lake captains' homes, using only your phone. It's simple and easy. Just go to our website shown here, find the item on the menu bar at the upper left named Free Self-Guided Walking Tours, and then scroll down to find the map with the instructions. Zoom in by street. When you find a captain's house you're interested in, click on it, and details appear on the right, along with a link to the YouTube episode from this channel that provides the biography of the captain that lived there. It's free, fun, and available any time you're out walking. Just bring along your phone. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.